Hi there, T again. Today, I'm going to do a video review of, I don't know if you would call it a franchise, but there have been three versions of this particular film based on the Stephen King novel, Salem's Lot. So basically, in 1975, I believe, Stephen King published a book called Salem's Lot based on vampires. I don't want to give away too much for those people who have never seen or read the books. Um, basically, it's basically about an author who comes back to his childhood town to write a novel about this house called the Marston House. And it's supposed to be set in the 1970s. And as we know with vampires, when a vampire comes in, like a spider, he'll the vampire will come in, will bite other victims and turn them into vampires or food for prey. So I believe Salem's Lot, which is one of my favorites of all the Stephen King novels and films, really illustrates dimensions of a vampire um, story and takes like Dracula to the whole next level. This is just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. I'm just putting my opinion out there. So basically, there was there's been three versions of Salem's Lot. The first one came out in 1979. Then 25 years later, in 2004, I believe it was for TNT. It was a mini series, just like the 1979 version. This one came out. It was a mini series, I think. I'm not sure. I recently watched the 2004 version, and then in last month, in October 2024, Max Cinemax, they call it Max now, released a new version 20 years after the 2004 version. Uh, and believe it or not, in 1987, they came up, studios decided to milk the franchise and decided to have a sequel called A Return to Salem's Lot. So I will get into all four of these. Right around mid to late October, I started with this one right here. This is my favorite right here. First time I watched the 1979 version was in 1979 when I was 9. I believe it came out in November, 45 years ago this month, in 79. In that version, really, I feel like elaborated good on the book. It was 3 hours, I believe, it was a three-part mini series. It had David Soul playing Bim Mears. It had a good set of cast members. The film slowly built up, and then when you get toward the end of the series, it really went fast. And you got this real, like part two, part three. You got to see the vampire himself. Um, so anybody, spoiler alert, um, Barlow, I believe, is the name of the vampire in all three versions. So you get to see Barlow in action toward the end of the series. So the original Salem's Lot really hit it on all points, I believe, and had a good soundtrack. It's very dated in special effects and makeup. This is way before digital CGI and that. So I recommend start with 1979 Salem's Lot, which I did. And then I managed to find a version, I managed to find online the 2004 version of Salem's Lot with Rob Lowe, who plays Ben Mears. And they tried to modernize it to the early 21st century. Um, and in fact, it sort of had, when it gets toward the second half of the series, it's sort of when the vampires are waking up, it had a comedy side to it. So that's about all I'm going to give you. And they sort of jumped to conclusion too fast. They didn't take their time like they did with the original version. But it was still interesting to watch, so it was worthwhile to watch. And then we'll go back to the 1987 sequel. I don't even want to go. There's not really much worth mentioning on that. If you need some comedy relief, I would consider a Return to Salem's Lot comedy relief. It just wasn't even scary. It was more funny and goofy and cheesy than scary. So, but if you want to see cheesiness and comedy, check that one out. A Return to Salem's Lot. That's the sequel of 1987 sequel. And then finally, we get on to the current version, 2024 current version. And this one makes a very serious attempt to go back to where the book is. And in terms of the vampire, not to give away too much, they try to go back to the look of the 1979 version of Barlow. 2004 was looked like a guy than anything, but I don't want to give away too much. In all the versions of Stryker was pretty accurate, spot on. I will say there were a couple scenes in the film where you're looking for the vampires and the vampires just jump right out at you. And I admit, I watched the 2024 version from Max during the daylight. I jumped right out of my seat. It scared the bejesus out of me, even at my age. So I give it props for trying to go back to the book, the current version, and trying to go back to the 1970s. I feel like and also that had a little comedy to it, is also, instead of a male doctor, there was a woman doctor, and instead of and one of the other main characters, which was the kid, which was in the original version was he was big on vampires. He was big on horror and breaking out of handcuffs and that. He was the co-star in the Salem's Lot, and then for 1979 and 2004. Well, in this new one, it's a black kid, and I believe he's like 9 years old. But he's a good one too. So I feel like the 2024 version falls short, and I'll tell you one main reason. I feel like they made it into a 2-hour film. and they cut a lot of detail out. I think, in my opinion, if they were really serious, not only should they have gone the same length as the 1979 version, but I feel like they should have gone maybe a half an hour more to elaborate on more details and not make. And another thing is, 04 and 24 versions made things too obvious. They they threw the surprises out there too quick. They didn't give the viewers enough time to really absorb what was going on. I feel like 04 version was too much cheese. Um, it felt like we already had covered a lot of territory. However, the current version made a good attempt at being serious and true to the book, but it fell short because they had cut at least an hour out of it. And like I said, like the old 4 version, there was a little bit of cheese in that too. The humor, you know. And in a thing like Salem's Lot, you can't really have comedy. If you're going to make it really scary, you got to cut the comedy part out. Nightmare on Elm Street, not to get off topic, really did a good job. First 3 especially did a good job in implementing comedy, but a dark comedy tone. Unfortunately, the old 4 version and the 2024 version tried this, but the comedy fell flat on its face. The 1987 version, Return to Salem's Lot, did a very good job on the comedy part, but it gets a complete F on the horror part. So, to summarize, if you just want to see one version, I recommend the original 1979 version. It's close enough to the books. It's set in the 70s. Good acting, good soundtrack for its time. And even though it's slow and dated, the makeup in it feels very real. And I feel like it's the only true version, the 1979 version. So, with that being said, that's my review for this time around. When I come up with another franchise or something to review, I will review it. So until then, stay scared, Mr. Barlow says, and take care. Happy Thanksgiving. Until then, be safe and have fun.